Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt once again, the astrologer with the asteroids. So once again, before I even begin, I'm going to discuss the glyphs, and those can be found at my website at divinationcounselingservice.org. And if you'd like to learn any more about the asteroids today's or any of the lists that I've done in the last 6 or 8 weeks, they can be found either here on a YouTube channel, or they can be found at my website, divinationcounselingservice.org. As always, I like to state my references. My references are generally based in the interpretations of Martha Lang Westcott. She has her own website at marthalangwestcott.com. My website, again, divinationcounselingservice.org. Okay? And you can find more information out there at these two websites. I highly recommend them. I also wanted to point out that the book that I used for today's work is The Orders of Light. Again, it's a Martha Lang Westcott book. Highly recommended. Okay. So today, because I'm trying to work now in groupings, because I think that sometimes that's an easier way to learn, we're going to start today with at least the first 7 of them will be asteroids that are the same as the trans-Neptunians. Okay? So if you're familiar with the trans-Neptunians, there's something that's used in Uranian astrology. Again, you could find at the website, there are Uranian astrology websites. They will give you in-depth educations on those trans-Neptunians, but so would, again, Martha's site and as well my site. Okay? Now, just moving on, just to kind of explain this a little bit, there are asteroids that we work with which have, in some cases, either similar interpretations or they have identical interpretations. Okay? So in most cases, they're identical. I also want to point out that every trans-Neptunian has an asteroid with the exception of Hades. There are other things in the chart that speak to the concept of deterioration, but they're not exactly like Hades. They don't have the same glyphs and they don't come under the same heading. So I left them alone for right now because I'd like to do a set of medical asteroids and then we'd get more into deterioration. Right now, I want to start with Cupido-A. Okay, Cupido-A is the only one that isn't really exactly like its counterpart. Cupido would be the counterpart for Cupido-A. Cupido has a much more extensive meaning. It can relate to family. It can relate to buildings. Okay, Cupido-A does not. Okay, so I want to start off right away with what it is not. It is faces. It's appearances. It's the appearance of things. If you want to see how you react to appearances or what appearances are most important to you, you would check to see where your own personal Cupido falls. Okay? So right now, Cupido-A is much more about vanity, physical features. It's about appearances. Okay? It has a glyph that's very similar, okay? Instead of the figure 4 that one might use for Jupiter, which is the base of the Cupido, it's, what is it, Jupiter and Venus together. This is actually a half circle, almost looks like Hades with Cupido mixed, okay? So you have the circle, okay, but this time the circle enclosed is not a cross, it's actually Venus. So you've got the half circle, you've got Venus inside of that half circle, and with most of these asteroids you have that additional A, which represents that it's an asteroid and not a trans-Neptunian. Apollonia is the exact same as Apollon. So it represents many of the same energies that you would find in the trans-Neptunian or the TNP. Apollon. Apollon is associated with one of many. In other words, there's much more than what might be originally thought. You think you got one problem, and if there's Apollonia involved, it going to extend into many problems. So it becomes more than one, okay? It also looks like the trans-Neptunian Apollon in that they're both this L shape with Gemini right over the final bar. So if it's a big L, the very bottom of that L, that horizontal line, is the sign of Gemini. And then extending from that would be a letter A, because today we're discussing the asteroid. The trans-Neptunian would be identical, but no A. Okay, so that again is expansion. You think of, I think of Apollonia or Apollon, a little bit like Jupiter, only minus the optimism. Okay, so it's a lot about expansion. It's about more than one. It's business. A lot of times it's related to business. If you want to see how successful you might be in business, you might want to study the axis of Apollon or Apollonia, okay, because they both represent the same thing here. Our next one is Admete, and Admete is the counterpart of Admetus, okay? So you're looking at the same energy. You would interpret it the very same way, just like you would Apollonia and Apollon. And here, the energy itself represents getting to the bottom of something, but it's also affiliated with landscaping, large boulders, something that's thick, okay, stuck, when you're blocked, so there's a lot of ways to look at Admete. I like the landscape concept. I like, when you're out in the country and you're looking out on Admete, the land. So Admete also, though, is obstacles. Admete looks just like it does. It's like the sign of Mercury with a cross in the head. So there's a cross inside the head, and it sits on a floor. And then the attached to the floor would be the A for the asteroid, and the trans-Neptunian would, of course, be exactly the same, but minus the A. Then it comes to Kron. Well, the counterpart is obviously Kronos, okay? And again, they are interpreted the same way. They're both about credibility. They're both about expertise. They're both about authority. They're both leaders, okay? They both can deal with height, when you fly, okay? If you're flying over water, you've got a Kron Atlantis, okay? So airline tickets. So Kron is height. Kron is credibility. It's authority. Kron is also timing. So schedules can come under Kron. As I said, expertise. It's about professionalism and fame in some cases. So that's Kron or Kronos. The glyph is this, I like to say a capital letter T, but it looks like an umbrella at the top. And then it has a cross, a line going across, a horizontal line going across the vertical line, so that you have a cross there. And again, at the bottom on the floor, you might have an A if it's the asteroid Kron versus the trans-Neptunian Kronos. Poseidon-A is our next one. And Poseidon-A, of course, counterpart Poseidon. They both deal with clarity. They both deal with education. They both deal with higher philosophy, that idea of clarity through knowledge. But it's also propaganda and media. So we have to be very careful. Poseidon is also windows. So the distinction here would be that A again, because the asteroid is actually what I like to refer to as the sign of Pisces on its side. So you have a top and a bottom half circles rather than side to side half circles that are conjunct by a horizontal line. In this case, it's a vertical line that pulls those circles together. And again, if it's the asteroid we're speaking of, then we would put an A on it. Okay, but again, they're interpreted the same way when you see them and use them in charts. Our next one is Vulcano. Vulcano, of course, Vulcanus. So it still deals with pressure. It deals with that concept of have to, that drive, being driven, those inner urges that tell us that we have to. Sometimes it's outer urges. There are people that are pressuring us. Coercion comes under Vulcanus. So does magnetism. I want to throw that in there because if you got a Venus Vulcanus, you could be very drawn to someone because of that magnetism. Okay, so that's a pressure as well, you know, that attraction. So it relates to pressure. It relates to have-tos, to coercions, to attempts to influence. All come under this heading. Again, we're looking at an arrow that points upward off the top of a triangle. With the asteroid, we would add the A. So the glyph, again, is identical with the exception of the additional A for asteroid. Zeus-A is, of course, Zeus. And Zeus we know of as excitement, the seed. It's also restraint. I mean, sometimes we're all excited on the inside, but we're also trying to really control that. Well, that's Zeus. And it's also Zeus-A. It's also inflammation, if we're talking medical astrology. It's the idea of the seed. It's that creative beginning, if you will, that creative edge, that excitement that drives us, that propels us. And oftentimes, in order to make it to the end of the project or to the end of whatever it is that is exciting us, we have to sustain that energy. And that's where the control comes in. Again, you're looking at an arrow pointing upward on top of an X. Once again, the additional A makes the distinction that it's an asteroid. Okay? Our last of the asteroids for today is a standalone. So it's not one of the trans-Neptunians. It's actually the asteroid Ophelia. And I love Ophelia because Ophelia, whether it's used in medical or if it's just used in an everyday chart, it relates to overreactions. When something is overdone, when inflammations cause overreactions, could cause a medical issue. You could be dealing with an Ophelia Zeus, especially if it connects in terms of a golden triangle or an axis. That would be telling you that something is overtly overreacting within your system, and that is never a good thing. But overreactions happen to us on an everyday level emotionally. And this, again, points the finger to, is it you that's overreacting or is it someone else that's overreacting? And again, if you have an Ophelia and you want to look up how and what it is that causes you to overreact, go look it up. House and sign will give you everything you need to know. In any event, I hope that this was informative. I hope that you will join me again in our continuing studies of the asteroids. Take care. Have a great day.